If you want to know what Rodney Dangerfield was like in real life, just watch this movie that's pretty close. He on the phone and he's like trimming his
Trimming his arm.
armpit hair.
They're like, why are you casting Joe Pesci in a comedy? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And the Bush is like giving him the worst advice. Easy money.
Easy money.
Yep. Which turns out it wasn't all that easy to get the money.
It wasn't easy at all. Not for Rodney Dangerfield.
No, it was rough money. It was hard to get money, actually.
Yeah, everybody might think it's easy money unless you're Monty Capoletti, who's a slovenly guy who likes to eat pizza and drink beer and smoke and gamble and do all basically the bad things. Basically, he's me.
All the
in
fun
20
things in
years.
life, really.
Well, and Rodney Dangerfield actually stated that Monty is the closest to his real life persona. So
Mm.
if you want to know what Rodney Dangerfield was like in real life, just watch this movie that's pretty close.
I believe that. I believe that. From what I hear, his stand-up was a lot like him.
Yeah, he's really funny. He's just got these one-liners, and
Mhm.
he reminds me of like when old school comedians in the 80s, they were still very popular. And not just as a throwback for boomers, like young people, kids knew Rodney and like all the kind of old school comedians. They were still very popular. They had their own movies. They were still on late night. And Rodney Dangerfield was part of that cohort. And this was his first movie that he made, that he led the role and starred in after Caddyshack. So this is the first Rodney Dangerfield movie, of which more came later.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people know Back to School is probably the one he's most famous for. But yeah, so he did one called Easy Money. And the idea, like you said, is he's this sloven, drunken troublemaker who's married to a woman whose mother happens to be a very rich woman. And she passes away and leaves her money to her daughter and her husband, Rodney Dangerfield, with the caveat that he has to give up all of his vices for one full year before he can get the money. And kind of goes through the trouble of doing that. His best friend is played by Joe Pesci.
It's his first comedic role.
Yeah, which we saw more of later, that's for sure.
And he was funny, dude. I would crack it up that time where he's so vain and strange that he's talking to Monty on the phone and he's like trimming his
Trimming his
armpit hair.
Yeah. 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 It has his daughter is marrying a guy who Rodney Dangerfield doesn't really much care for, played by Tyler Negron. Negron, is that how you'd say that? And so there's kind of that whole bit. You've got Jeffrey Jones in it, who I always think of Jeffrey Jones from Howard the Duck. I know he did other films, but to me, he's always
He's the dad from Beetlejuice.
and the dad from Beetlejuice. Exactly.
Yeah, that's how I think of him.
Yeah. If you need some kind of quirky looking guy to most likely play the villain in something, you went to Jeffrey Jones in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he smokes weed too. So he and his friend, they smoke weed, and so they can't even really get the wedding cake properly without crashing, and they're causing all these. They're just real kind of loser guys, but they're hilarious. But yeah, the mom-in-law dies. She's the Monahan, Mrs. Monahan, and he's a Capuletti. Do you know where they got these names?
Sounds vaguely Shakespearean to me.
Yeah, so it's a play on the Montagues and the Capulets because they had that family
Montagues.
rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Capulettis were the Italians and the Monahans were the Irish. And she doesn't like, the old lady doesn't like her daughter marrying such a schlub. Yeah, so she says, "Hey, man, there's all these hijinks," and he's a photographer, so his job is to like do kids photography. It reminded me of you. Remember when I hired you way back in the day, and
Yeah.
it was like with my son was small and my in-laws were still there, and my ex-wife was fighting with the mom-in-law, and the dad was wandering off, and the kid is just wanting to play and slobber. We're just looking at each other like, oh.
Yeah.
This is
Oh man, let me
insane.
tell you, especially when I opened up the studio, I did so many families and children and stuff like that. So I've certainly been there of like, come on, kid, come on, just give me the right look. Just, because he's got the bit with the one on the rocking horse, the little fat kid. And he's like, come on, kid, just one. I
Yeah, and
just
he's
want
got the
one.
other
Like,
bit where Monty goes to the little girl, and the little girl's sad because that boy doesn't like him, and he's talking like an adult, like, "What do you see in him anyway? I don't think he has a future. Look at him.
yeah,
You got to get
cake on
over
his
this kind of
face.
thing." Rodney
Yeah, it's
Dangerfield's funny, dude. He cracks me up. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, this film has so many great like one-liner. I mean, obviously because it's Rodney Dangerfield, but it's total one-liner joke set up and deliver central throughout the entire film. There's so many good ones in this film.
Yeah. Just he's the king of one-liners, man. Just
Uh-huh.
bam, bam, one after the other. Did you notice when he was drinking his beer, it was always Miller Lite?
Yeah,
Because he was the spokesman for Miller Lite beer. He did commercials for him. So in all of his movies, pretty much all of his movies throughout the 80s, he could only drink Miller Lite because they weren't allowed to show anything else.
yeah. You want to be our spokesman? You got to drink Miller Lite, pal. All right.
Yep, even in your movies, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it was interesting. Did you notice how like they would set up a lot of stuff though and not deliver like the cake bit, right? So full well as soon as they're picking up the cake that they're going to fuck that up. But then,
Mm.
like, which they do, no surprises, no spoiler on that one, audience. But then you don't see the bit at the reception where they have no cake and the reaction from the family to the fact that there's no cake, right? Like, at no point in time did anybody get
Where the
offended
fuck
at the
is the
fact that they
cake?
screwed up this giant, huge ass cake, by the way. Yeah.
In that way, it's kind of a cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
You know how in cartoons where you might drop an anvil on somebody and one of the cartoon characters like gets ripped apart or whatever, but then the next scene everything's fine, they're just going on to the next scene. In that way, I think it's very I don't know that they just missed it. I think they did that intentionally. I
Yeah.
think the whole thing is a series of scenes that are kind of like a cartoon. Like, okay, that last scene, it's over, and the consequences of that are not going to be really seen that much in this next scene because it's a cartoon, kind of rated R cartoon with some nudity. And
Yeah. Which is surprising that Roger Ebert or was it Gene Siskel? Gene Siskel liked this film.
really.
Yeah, he gave it 3 stars out of 4. And according to Wikipedia, the big discovery in the comedy, Easy Money, is that Rodney Dangerfield, unlike most stand up comics, does not need dialogue to be funny. He is funny just standing still, or his version of standing still, which includes nervous twitching, profuse sweating, pained expression, and rolling of the eyes. He
Well,
called,
if you think about it, Rodney, that's true. You
Mhm.
could just look at him. He looks like a human cartoon character with his bug eyes, and he's just kind of like he's like a walking cartoon character. I think he came from another universe, like a cartoon universe, and landed in ours somehow. Because the guy is just funny to look at. Just he's funny, dude.
Oh, totally. His movements, he always looks like he's about ready to have like some kind of like attack of like of like physical what's the thing where you kind of
Spasm,
yeah, like yeah, where you
like
fall
a
over.
seizure.
Seizure, there you go. He always looks like he's right on the edge of having a seizure, you know?
Or like he's about to go do something, but then he stops. Like, oh,
Oh,
I was
yeah.
going. What did I come into this room for? I don't know.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, he's funny. Um, th- this movie was directed by Joseph Saddlemeyer, and I think he only did one other theatrical movie, which was uh, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and then everything else was kind of video and stuff. And I wonder why, because I think this movie was pretty good, like a launching point. You'd think you'd probably make quite a few other things after this movie because it's pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. It's weird that he didn't do much after this because the film made money. I think the gross was like 29 million or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a financial success. So you would think that putting his name on there would have been like, hey, yeah, let's give him something else.
Yeah, I don't know, but um yeah, it's I mean he still worked and stuff. I'm just surprised when I saw that this was kind of he only did one other theatrically released movie other than this because I think this was pretty well done and
Mm-hmm.
it did well, so I don't know. Um it's funny to see Joe Pesci because he's funny now, but I wonder back then what people might have thought because he can go total drama, which is probably where he started, like the mafia dude killing people, whatever.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're thinking like Goodfellas and all that kind of stuff, where he's a
This
mafia.
scary little fella, like he scares me in that movie, right? But then this is his first movie, and I know that he's funny, but I wonder back in 1983 if people were like, "Oh, Joe Pesci, he's actually funny."
They're like, why are you casting Joe Pesci in a comedy? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, now we're like, "Oh, that totally makes sense."
Uh-huh.
My cousin Vinny, yeah, he's a funny guy, but back
Yeah.
then maybe they didn't really know it.
Yeah.
Um,
I do feel like the female characters weren't well written and hashed out, especially the wife. I mean,
mm,
she's like the most understanding wife ever to have known to have exist. Like Rodney Dangerfield was all over the place and she never really seemed to get all mad at him. She even was like, yeah, I don't care about the money, whatever, I just want you to be you. And it's like, even if you is the drunken stone slob that destroys wedding cakes and comes home late reeking of liquor and like come on, like she just kind of was like, yeah, okay, she was just kind of always there.
yeah, and I think maybe you had a lot of wife characters like that in comedies back then. You even take a look at Marge Simpson. Like she's a really nice lady, and she
Mm-hmm.
puts up with a lot of Homer shit. So I
Yeah.
think you had a lot of that back then. I don't think you could. I don't see anyone writing female like spousal characters like that these days. I don't think it would fly at all.
Oh, definitely not. I mean,
So I think the wife character, kind of the understanding wife trope, is a very dead and buried concept in entertainment.
mhm.
Which maybe it's probably for the better, but it's just interesting to see like these type of movies where you're right, the wife is like, what? How can you be that understanding? And your family is wealthy, like really wealthy, and then if the mom died and said, "Hey, if you clean up your act, you can get $10 million." Well, you could do then she really kind of cares about him too, because she could just say, "Hey, I'm leaving this $10 million, in a trust for my daughter and my grandkids, and you don't get a lick of it because you're a goon."
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, in order to get that money, he's got to stop drinking. He can't go to the horse races with his buddy anymore. He can't smoke weed. He can't eat
That was
pizza.
another one. It's like, so they go to the horse races, their horse is winning. First, the jockey then decides to intentionally lose the race,
Mm-hmm.
right? But they don't explain why. I'm obviously the jockey must have been paid off for some reason. But why? Where's that storyline other than to piss these guys off that their horse lost?
Yeah, it's really strange, and that might what they do in this movie might piss me off if it's not done well. Because, like you said, they go to the wedding after destroying the cake, and they never mention the cake. They almost win, but the jockey,
Intentionally
stops
loses.
himself. But then they never explore why. He just kind of did for some reason.
Yeah, it's just to set up the joke of them losing and Joe Pesci getting pissed and that kind of stuff.
And I want to. If you don't pull that off right, it would anger me, and
Mhm.
I would not like this movie. But I think they really did a cartoony thing where they're like, yeah, that shit happens, and who cares? It's a Rodney Dangerfield comedy. Don't
Yeah,
think too much. Just
yeah.
shit happens. It's funny. Then we move on.
People are here to see Rodney Dangerfield be Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah, this is what it is. It's like, don't think about why things happen too much. We have this human cartoon character who's funny as shit, and he's gonna do funny shit, and that's it. Don't think.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
the
that's right.
The daughter bit stuff was pretty fun, though. I think with Taylor Negron and Jennifer Jason Leigh as the daughter, just the
Yeah.
fact that like the getting married, and then she's like, "Oh, I don't know, well, my, as they're getting like in the honeymoon room and stuff, and she's like, I just was hearing my father say no, and he's like, oh, that's just before marriage. Now it's yes, and she's like, like, just that whole bit of him like trying to get with her,
Yeah,
and
and
her
he's kind of
just,
like this Latin guy, and he goes
yeah,
to try to get her back, and his friends in the bushes
doing a, yeah.
trying to do a Cyrano de Bergerac kind of thing, but then he keeps talking to him, but it looks like he's talking to the bush. So
Mhm.
instead of romantic, he looks like a complete psycho talking to a bush.
And the bush is like giving him the worst advice as well. It's like, just tell her you're the man and to get her ass down here, whatever it was he was saying, like that kind of stuff. I'm the man, jump up and down. I'm the man. Yeah. Terrible
Yeah.
advice.
It's
And
just it's a funny movie because one, it's Rodney Dangerfield, and I think they're like, this guy needs his own movie, and they were completely right. Then that's why he had a number of movies after that that, as far as I know, did pretty well. See, this is the first time that Joe Pesci came in as a comedic role, and it turns out he's funny. He's very funny. So I think this kind of set off a lot of kind of career things for some people. Um, and it's just fun, dude. I'm gonna give it my thumbs up for sure.
oh yeah, I totally agree. I mean, yeah, there's stuff about this thing that doesn't work, and like I said, but you accept it because it's just ridiculous. It's a ridiculous film, and that's what makes it so much fun to watch. It's the one-liners, the ridiculous behavior of the characters, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, if you can pull off just not explaining stuff that or just like, well, that's over and you never hear from it about it again, kind of stuff. Normally that pisses me off, but this, for some reason, it works. If you can pull that off, then you've done well.
Yeah.
And I think this is the reason why we want to do this one is it's kind of overlooked in that I didn't really remember it. I remember a lot of his other films after this, but I was like, oh yeah, this first one, Easy Money, I haven't seen that probably since the 80s.
Yeah, I had never seen this one, which is why I think it's overlooked as well, because I had seen, like I said, Caddyshack and Back to School and all that kind of stuff. But I knew of this one, but I'd never seen it. And I think it's great. It's totally overlooked.
Yeah. And I'd like to kind of dive more into at some point what Joseph Saddlemeyer kind of did, because all I got was like, this is one of only two theatrical movies, but I haven't looked into it, but I want to see kind of what other things he's done as well, because I think this is pretty good.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It could just
I,
be he really enjoyed doing the other stuff that he did, or,
yeah,
making a movie is a lot of work over a long period of time. And so maybe it was just simply like, hey, it's my life's a lot more chill making videos and TV shows and that kind of stuff and all the other stuff that he did.
yeah. And this is a good chance to remember Rodney Dangerfield. He died almost 20 years ago.
It's been a while. Yeah.
Um,
I bet you could mention him to kids nowadays and they'd be like, who's that? Or they'd be like, yeah, I think I've heard the name, but I don't know. I did that with my wife, but that's typical of her because she was raised in Germany. And so I'm like, yeah, you want to watch a Rodney Dangerfield movie? And she's like, who's that? And I'm like, Germans.
well, and he was part of that cohort, like Milton Berle and um, who's the guy? George Burns,
Yeah.
where these were very old school comedians. They'd been around a long time, but they were just as popular. Like George Burns had his own movies, very popular movies,
Oh yeah, the God movies, those were fun. I
yeah,
remember those.
and Milton Berle was like in Rat glam band music videos, you know. And it wasn't like it was just the throwback, like for nostalgia. They were popular in their own right. Because even I remember when I was a kid, I knew these guys. They were popular with us.
Mm.
It's not like they were just kind of around because boomers liked them. They were popular with us too. So they were just very talented comedians, and they had long they into decades and decades of being very popular. And Rodney Dangerfield is one of them because he's just funny, dude. The guy's one-liners crack me up. and he's a goofy looking dude, man. He's just a goofy
Yeah,
looking guy.
it
You look
works
at him, he's like,
perfect for
"Durr."
him. Exactly. He physically looks the character and bits of his comedy, and you buy into it 100%. He's always got his kind of ratty suit on with his tie
Yeah,
going and
like a
stuff,
car
but
salesman kind of suit thing going on.
absolutely.
Like like he just gambled all his money away.
Yep.
And he does. And before you even even goes cracks his one-liners, he's already funny just looking at him. And then he cracks his one-liners, and it's like, oh God, this guy cracks me up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great to remember Rodney Dangerfield, because even though he has been around way before the 80s, he was a fixture of the 80s. He was a symbol of the 80s.
Oh, totally. I remember watching his stuff when I was a kid. Loved it. Loved it then,
Yeah, and
loved
he
it
was on
now.
like late night TV all the time. They always love to have him on
Yeah,
because
Johnny
he's a
Carson.
good,
He was on
reliable
Johnny
crack
Carson a
up.
lot.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, if you want to figure out whether he gets that easy money or how he gets it or if he gets it, watch the movie, because I'm not gonna spoil it. Yeah,
Good job, Jamie.
I'm not gonna spoil it. You have to watch it. So
Check it
go
out.
find it, watch it. You'll laugh. Don't think too much, and then you'll get to see whether he gets the money or not, and you get to see what happens.
Yeah.
Do it.